Sweet. All right. Why don't I introduce, I guess, Align, and then I'll allow you to introduce yourself.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So, hi everyone. My name is Chris Lamb. I am one of the two co-executive directors of Align, which stands for the Alliance for the Low Income First Generation Narrative. We are a conference series that happens annually, rotating from school to school. We started in well, we've had several false starts, but our first true conference was in 2017 at Barnard College in New York City. That was when I was a senior in college. Since then, we've had conferences in the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. That was in 2018. And in 2019, University of Virginia. Then, hello, Kat. His name is Junior.
Hey, hi,
um, so we were going to have a conference at jointly hosted in Richmond by the University of Richmond and Virginia Commonwealth University this past spring, but then the pandemic swept into the United States and we couldn't have that anymore. So instead, we switched to an online version called Align Online, and you can check our YouTube channel for archived videos of those sessions. But that's our bread and butter, conference organizing. But since then, especially because of the pandemic and just normal being turned on its head, we've decided to put out more content that can stand on its own, rather than just a thing that happens once, 1 out of 52 weekends per year. We want something that that people can refer to later on, or in just a different way. The additional benefit is that perhaps we could reach more people than just the 200 people who show up for this conference. So with that said, this is the first interview in our hopefully this will become a series of interviews with people who've current students as well as alumni who've gone through the first gen low income experience. Yeah, I guess the idea is hopefully we can get some interesting stories and advice, and at the very bare minimum just some sense of solidarity that students can touch in this especially uncertain time. So that's the intro. Hopefully future intros will be shorter than this, yeah. So Stephanie, I guess to give a little bit of context, I posted a question on Latanya Reese-Miles' Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group. If you've never heard of that Facebook group, go join that group. It's got like over 4,000 people on it, and a lot of engaging conversation happens like every hour, not just every day. And I asked people on her group to give advice to their younger selves if they were going back to school this semester. What would you tell that? What piece of wisdom would you give yourself? And one of the most active reply threads was from Stephanie Youngblood, my guest today. So Stephanie, thank you for joining me. And yeah, could you start off by talking a little bit about who you are? And we'll start with who you are. Who are you?
My name's Stephanie. I actually have a background in teaching ESL. That was my original planned career, I guess. I went to the University of Connecticut. I graduated in 2005. And I was kind of like a non-traditional student in a way, even though I was the right age, I guess, for a traditional college student, because I was living at home and working and going to school at night, just to be able to pay for things and not go into debt with dorms and all of that stuff. And so I like sped through it. I got done in like half the time just because I was always just taking classes and trying to get it done with, because I was really thinking about the money part. Right. And not so much like the whole experience. So in 2006, like I think a month after I graduated from UConn, I started my master's program at Columbia, and it was to get a teaching credential basically and teach K-12 ESL. And I did that for a little bit. There was a hiring freeze around like 2008 economic crash. So I just kind of transitioned to working with adults at that time, and that led me to this position at UCLA that I did for 6 years, which just ended about a month and a half ago, which was working for Project Spell. And that's a volunteer program at UCLA that basically we recruited students, current undergrad, graduate students, to tutor our campus service staff. So that includes custodial staff, maintenance staff, food service workers, those types of positions, and help them learn English. So anywhere between 75 to 95% of our tutors each quarter were first-gen college students, and I would say probably around the same percentage or more were from immigrant backgrounds themselves, and just really related in some way, whether they learn English themselves or, you know, their parents did, their family members did. You know, they just really related to kind of the struggles of those campus service workers. So I, through that position, you know, got a lot of experience and lessons, I guess, from those first-gen students, from advising them, training them, and, you know, definitely was not limited to just tutoring. You know, there's so many other things that affect how they can be successful in any activity they participate in. So, you know, definitely kind of flipped my experience on its head, you know, being the first gen and then suddenly being the one advising first gens and really having to reflect on all that. So that program was defunded as of June 30th due to all the COVID stuff. So now I'm just de-stressing, but that was my life for 6 years.
Wow. First, quick sidebar. So you went to Columbia at Teachers College?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I went there for my undergrad, but probably a little bit after you. Well, what was like a standout memory? Did you have any standout memories of your time in New York?
I mean, I don't know, grad school. I think college was a little more, maybe the people at my school are a little more similar to me. It was a lot of non-traditional students, a lot of people that were older that like had kids that were going back to school, or, you know, people like me that had to work. And when I went to grad school, it was kind of the opposite of that. It was, you know, no one in my cohort had a job. I was the only one, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, how? Just little things were shocking to me in a strange way. And I was also really young. I had just turned 22, like a month before I started grad school. So,
Right.
you know, I just didn't know what was going on in my life. And there were all these people that were so different than me, and professors too, professors that like were not understanding that I was coming from the Bronx, from my job to, you know, Morningside Heights to go to school. And I don't know if you've taken the train in the Bronx very often, but like the 2-5 train, it's always a mess. It's always like, oh, sorry, you're gonna have to go 20 minutes in the opposite direction, switch, come back downtown. You get back downtown to transfer, you find out whatever bus isn't running that day. And, you know, small things like trying to eat in class, like have a bag of chips in class is like, I had, you know, professors that were like, that is rude, that is unacceptable, you know, this is not a cafeteria. And it was like a very different vibe, and I think a lot of privilege, but you have to remember, like, this is 2006, 2007, so people are not really talking about these things yet too much. And there definitely wasn't like an online community to talk about it. So I don't necessarily have like really good memories from that time. It was more something I was just trying to get through. Of course, I did student teaching, and, you know, I have a lot of good memories from that and a lot of students that I still stay in touch with, but actual stuff happening on site, I don't know.
That was the opposite. I don't know if there's a word for the opposite of a leading question, but that was it, because I don't know anybody personally who's had a positive experience at Columbia. So there's, even in the undergrad, I can say there's a lot of privilege that happens.
Well, Ivy Leagues are glorified investment banks at this point. So I think, like, of course, it's a huge achievement to get in and get that degree. And that's not taking anything away from the students who go there. But I don't know how focused the institution is on equity or, you know, anything that would affect first gens in particular. So
Yeah.
you kind of just have to like struggle through it, I think, when you're there and keep your eye on the prize and not let it, like, not internalize it too much,
Yeah. Yeah. I
which
think
is hard.
compared to the other Ivies, I think Columbia is pretty reactive, like behind the ball when it comes to first and low income support, like within the past like couple years even. So it had to take a lot of like naming and shaming, like to get things done. Um, hopefully,
Yeah.
I think we are in a better spot now than when I was like even 3 years ago when I was a senior there. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's been a painful fight. So uh, you so the past 6 years you were like in charge of a program like that's like going from undergrad straight to grad school and then having this position where you are like a manager amongst other things. What lessons have you learned from that you like didn't know heading into this job?
I mean, I think, coming from a teaching background where, I did teach middle school for a little bit, I taught abroad in Budapest.
Oh
I
wow.
taught adults, and then I taught adults like around New York for a little bit before I came out to LA. So, the teaching, I guess, professional life is very different. You're kind of like on your own in your class, you do your thing, you're not doing so much bureaucratic stuff, I guess.
Hmm.
So coming to UCLA, all of a sudden it was like my inbox was totally full all the time, and I really had to learn like this complex system. And there's so many people at UCLA that work there that are alums, and even like double or triple alums, and they know it. And there's so many acronyms. So when I first got there, I'm like, what is the SAC? What is the Hill? What are all these things? I didn't know where the Bruin Bear was, and that's like a really central landmark on campus. So just learning the ins and outs of that, especially like not even being from California, it's definitely, it can be daunting. Like people kind of assume you know things, and you kind of doubt yourself. Like you start to feel stupid, like, oh, I should have known that, or I should have been able to figure that out. I think that was definitely a big lesson. And, there's a lot of cultural differences with the way that I think I interact with people and treat people and how I expect to be treated. And people that may be from a little bit more privileged background in certain ways, that's not to say I have no privilege, but certain things that were different from mine, it's definitely times that I felt a little bit discouraged. And I think learning how to push through that, I have some Puerto Rican background, right, on one side. And so when people found that out, it all of a sudden, like hearing J-Lo jokes from my coworkers, or having people say, oh, you don't celebrate Day of the Dead, but like, isn't Puerto Rico just like Mexico? Like some of
Right.
these things that, of course, these people don't mean any harm, but it's so ignorant. And it's like, I'm just trying to do my job, but now I need to be like the community educator for this office of people that, I always say being quiet is free, and it doesn't cost you anything to just not comment. Just if you don't know about something, you can just simply be quiet, and that is a-okay. But people don't do that in the office, and so I think it's like this expectation that you always have to be the professional one that's responds in this really nice way and is like, oh well, no, actually, I don't like to be called J-Lo, and here's why. It's like you can never get angry about those things. You can never have an attitude about it. You always kind of have to be like the bigger person or take the high road. And I think learning how to deal with that and not internalize it, not let it frustrate you, not dwell on it. I think that was really hard for me at first, because I was so used to like being in my classroom and just doing my thing. And so, to be honest, even to the end, it was still a little bit difficult. I don't think that ever goes away, because that's what these institutions are, so I don't know. I don't have any like advice for other people except just trying to like zoom out a little bit and not make your whole day about that one comment. Otherwise, it's going to chip away at you, and there's going to be nothing left of you to give to your passion.
Damn, that's real. That's super real. But actually, there was one advice that you did give. Um, the piece of advice that like just kicked off a chain of responses in that Facebook post.
Yeah.
So like, so maybe, yeah, maybe playing defense is hard. But at the same time, maybe it's also not the only thing that you have to do, like, playing offense, taking space. So could you talk a little bit about, like, just first of all, what does that mean in general?
Taking up space. I mean, I think, the big difference between a lot of first gens and non-first gens, or even like legacy students, whose entire lineage has gone to a school, is you are confident, like you're okay with failure. Like it doesn't even really register to you. There are all these risks and danger zones as a first gen that you kind of like have this little alert go off in your mind of, I think, all the what ifs, and it goes right to the negative. What if I look stupid? What if I fail? What if I suck at this? What if they don't think I'm as good as them? What if, oh, I'm the only like XYZ identity here, so I have to represent like everyone on earth with that identity. I think there's just a lot of like warning signals that go off, almost like a fight or flight type of response. And I think other students simply do not deal with that. They show up somewhere and it's just a given that they belong there and that they should be there. And I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of students in student jobs, leading clubs, all sorts of things that did not belong there and really like were awful at what they were doing, but they didn't learn, they didn't grow, because it just never occurred to them that they didn't deserve what they had. And so, I think one of those things for first gens is you get there, you're adjusting to the school, you're like, let me wait it out, let me see what things are all about, and other students just jump right in. What happens is you have these students that may be less qualified, less skilled, less experienced than you, but they don't doubt themselves, and they do get those leadership roles, and they start dominating things on campus, and it just reinforces this system. So you can admit as many first gen students, as many low income students as you want at a school, but I'm kind of looking at like, well, what's the advancement and what's the retention for those students? Yeah. And yeah, part of it is the school, but part of it is also like us being comfortable taking up space. And sometimes that means creating our own spaces. And I think that's so important. And sometimes that means taking up space in, areas that are not traditionally dominated by first gens, but that takes a lot of confidence, or it takes a lot of bravery. Like you either have to say, I'm probably going to fail at this, and it might be embarrassing, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Like throw caution to the wind. And I think those things are so hard for first gens because you feel this pressure of like one failure is overall failure. If I fail at one thing, it means I don't deserve to be here. And I think like it's, I can't say, oh, just take up space. It's as easy as that. But I think talking to yourself that way, and every time you have that negative voice that says, I don't know if like I'm good enough for this, or if I deserve to be here, kind of talking back to yourself with another voice that says, you deserve to be here. Why do they deserve to be here more than you? Who are they? Who are these other kids? Like, why am I had to work harder to get here than them. I didn't have tutors. I didn't have this, that, or the other thing, and I'm here. And I think it's just learning how to talk to yourself. And when you go through those what if scenarios, also thinking of, not just the negative, like, oh, what if I fail, but thinking of, oh, what if I succeed and I'm awesome at this and I kick ass? I mean, that can happen too. And envisioning that, I think it makes it easier to take up that space. And it's not just symbolic. It's like physically being somewhere and standing up and, asking a question, bringing up something that's important to you. And, not feeling like you have to kind of sit in the back corner. I think that's really hard for first gens, but baby steps you know, just
Yeah.
raising your hand and saying one thing at like a town hall, it can, you know, push you to like the next step that you're going to take in asserting yourself. So
Yeah. Practice with low stakes and then
mhm.
up the stakes.
Yeah,
What
definitely.
considerations might you have to that to these points in a virtual or a hybrid setting? I mean, I my first guess is that they actually wouldn't change that much, right?
You know, I think this whole remote learning thing is definitely pushed people to consider accessibility and what that means. And we kind of assume like, oh, we're all in the same room together, everyone's engaged, they're all sitting there, they're all listening to the same thing, and you control the environment. And now that everyone's in their house and the environment is not controlled, I think people are starting to think about like, okay, well, I am not making my class, you know, all turn their camera on because I'm trying to respect their privacy and what, you know, their home life may be like that I actually don't have a right to peek into. So they're trying to figure out some other ways to engage students and make sure that people are connected. And I think a lot of these things, you know, I hope that they keep doing them when we eventually get back in person. You know, providing options. I think that's the biggest like overall thing I can say is just giving options. There is no reason why we need to have one way of doing things and everyone has to respond or participate that way.
Yeah.
I know a lot of participation grades are about how often you talk in class. So I remember the people that had no problem talking a lot in my classes, and it was usually people that were contributing nothing, and probably like could have stood to do a little more listening. So I don't know if that's, especially as a former, you know, classroom teacher, I don't know if that's the best measure. I know that people can be active listeners and really be processing, you know, in their own mind, like what I'm hearing, and they might not be able to just throw something out there and talk. In addition, like if you are, I don't know, the only Latina girl in your STEM class, how comfortable do you feel? I mean, like, are we really creating conditions for success? So I think we have to think about that. Like, what are the conditions for success for this group of people? And when you think about that for your, you know, maybe for your underserved students, it benefits all of your students. It benefits everyone. So thinking about ways that students can participate that is not necessarily just constantly like throwing out an opinion in class and being the one to talk all the time. Providing access that does not require on Wi-Fi and really good Wi-Fi. I know for me, I had to give my UCLA laptop back a few weeks ago, and like the struggle has been real. I had to pull out this old laptop that I bought for $200, like I think like 10, maybe not 10 years ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And I have to call in from my phone because like the audio is awful if I do the, you know, a call with the laptop audio. It's like, so I'm like thinking, okay, if I'm struggling, I know these students are. And so when we put these requirements on them without providing resources and accessibility, you know, it's kind of like the opposite of taking up space. You're telling them like, you don't deserve to be in this space until you meet these requirements that everyone else was just given. And so I think, you know, I'm not necessarily going to say like specific things because I haven't been doing anything online with my, you know, with my work, but I think just really considering every possible option that will make things more accessible to students and more inclusive of students, and anticipating those things. Do not wait until your students or your, you know, your advisees say, oh, this is what we need. Like if they do, that's great, listen to them, but you should be anticipating what people need. That's what inclusion is. You know, it's no different than having name tags with pronouns on them and learning people's pronouns ahead of time instead of making them correct you, you know? So I think these schools, they're looking at that now because they're getting called out very publicly for a lot of these inequities. But it's something that we should always be doing And that requires like a very radical restructuring of the entire way that we do university and college. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but it requires you guys to push a lot and complain and make a big deal and protest and call people out. So just keep doing that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm starting grad school this semester, and I will be a teaching assistant. So for the first time, this is actually like, really good to remember. It's easy to forget, especially when you're like trying to like hold all the other concerns of being a first time TA in your head. So advice for educators, but in terms of advice for students, obviously, none of us, because you weren't in school and I wasn't in school last semester, in the spring when everything fell apart. So we can't give like a tangible like experience-based advice on like hey students, like if you do this thing you'll be okay. But students are concerned, just like from talking to them over the past couple months, especially just over the summer, and as school gets closer and closer and school have started. There's been a lot of back and forth on policies, waiting until the very last minute until they drop some language on policies, and just establishing policies that students don't agree with, or that they feel puts them or their families in harm's way. So all that said, these are big concerns that like nobody could ever like mitigate with like a paragraph of words. But all that said, could you try? Could you like if this was you, like 15 years ago, like Stephanie, entering her junior year of college, and things have suddenly gone to shit. What would you tell her, like right now, like, hey, don't worry, blah 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 blah?
Well, actually, when I was in grad school, I had a somewhat parallel experience because I did not have a laptop, and I was living in Connecticut and commuting to my job in New York in the Bronx, and then going to grad school at Columbia at night. And so I had to go to the local Bridgeport Public Library on Madison Avenue. Shout out. That school got me through, or that library got me through grad school. You would go in. So you're too young for this, but I'm going to take you back like a walk down memory lane. This is like, I don't know, 2006, I guess. And when you went to the library, like the computers were not really like what they are now. And you had to basically go in, you would sign up. There were 6 computers for everybody in the whole library. And you would sign your name on, and when it was your turn, you could use the computer for 30 minutes. And then if you needed more time on the computer, you had to go back and put your name on the list again. So that's how I did all my research and my papers, was just by going there and doing that at 30 minutes at a time.
Wow.
Sometimes it was less busy and I could like, kind of keep going, but there were a lot of times that I had to wait my turn again, and just, bring myself over to a table, process stuff, take notes, write, highlight, and then be like, okay, now I'm ready to go back and either use the internet or write like my thesis or whatever I was working on. So I think the big difference, I guess, in my mindset is that I know that we tend to take a lot of pride in the extra work we do and the hard work we do that others don't have to do, and we should. We should take pride in it, but we shouldn't have to do these things. And I think we need to get it through our heads that like this struggle should not be the price of getting your degree. You shouldn't have to go through these things just because you don't have a laptop or you don't have good Wi-Fi where you live or whatever. I mean, we kind of look at these things as the price of it, right? And I think especially the older generation that paid like $150 a semester for school and then immediately, started defunding public universities. And could support their whole family with like one job at a factory and the wife staying home and all of that. It's like things have changed, right? But they kind of tend to look at probably my generation and younger is just lazy and we don't want to work hard. And I think the point is like, we do want to work hard, but we want to work hard on our thesis, not on getting our internet connection together or like, any of these other silly logistical things that are just unnecessary barriers, right? So I think like the big difference for me now is that I'm so much more comfortable saying, this is what my life is like. This is what I have access to. This is how my brain works. This is what's appropriate for me culturally. And these are things that I need to be successful. And I think that's something that is really difficult if you come from a background especially if you come from a background that tells you to be humble on top of the whole first gen imposter syndrome or, not wanting to be a bothered type of thing. Mm-hmm. But for me, I have ADHD and I have gone through a lot of struggle with just knowing how people judge the way that I do things. And now I'm like, this is how my brain works. If you want me to be successful with this, this is what I need to succeed. And then from there, it's like the ball's in your court. Like, do you want to be a shitty manager and, tell me, no, I don't care? I mean, these are kind of basic things. You don't have to worry about asking for like an office chair or like, some of these things. So why should I worry about saying, hey, I need to have this type of environment or this type of resource or, whatever it may be to be successful. But I think it's hard to do that. So like you said earlier, like low stakes, advocating for yourself with small things and getting practice at it. And instead of apologizing for asking, just saying thank you. Instead of saying, oh, I'm so sorry to bother you about this, just saying, hey, thank you for giving that to me and knowing that you deserve it, that you deserve to have these things that are automatically given to everyone else. And that actually you shouldn't have to ask for it in the first place.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But that's like a whole like mindset shift. So, I mean, I'm 35 now, I'm almost 36. So this did not happen like when I was in college or, overnight or anything, but it's been like this 20-year journey of like, really being okay with people not understanding where I come from and who I am and how I do things and thinking, they can take it or leave it, but I'm not the problem. So I hope like all first gens around the world can internalize that mindset of like, I am not the problem here.
I think a lot of our students, every student should hear this. And internalize it. So yeah, that's great advice. I want to pivot a little bit to your career before we wrap things up. So your career field is in education. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how you decided like, hey, this is what I want to do. And it didn't have to be like when I was young, I always wanted to do this. It could be like I accidentally fell into this and then I fell in love with it afterwards. And what plans? I guess I'm particularly interested in what plans you made in building your career up, and what if any moments where there were like, oh, my plans went to shit. I needed to adapt in this way or that way.
Well, when I was a kid, I didn't know jobs beyond, I don't know, doctor, teacher, fireman, ballerina, astronaut. I don't know. It was like very, very limited, right? I mean, I think back on those books we'd read as kids, like community helpers. I think those were the jobs that I knew existed. And beyond that, it was just like, I don't know. It's like this vague idea of somebody that works in an office. And then this other vague idea of like really rich people that I don't really know what they do either, but like, I just know that, they're balling, so good for them. And then this other class of people that, I heard over and over again growing up, you better study hard or, you're going to end up like them working in McDonald's. I heard that constantly from teachers, which I find really disrespectful for a lot of reasons. If you feel that way, you just should not eat food that was prepared for you by anyone else. I just don't like this attitude. So I think, right there, the mindset that we're kind of pushed into this career choice thing with is not helpful, right? Again, it's not creating conditions for success. So I went to school. I just didn't really know. I was just trying to get done as soon as possible. I had to volunteer for a class. It was like a service learning type of class. So I volunteered at a school. I started doing little reading circles with these third graders that were so cute, becoming more interested in those ESL students that, they really don't get the support they need. This is not like a call out to the instructor at that school or anything like that, but it's just the nature, again, like we are not being inclusive of these students in a regular classroom. So they are just kind of expected to sit there until the English appears in their brains. I don't really know what the method is, but I started becoming more and more interested in providing support for them. And so that's why I applied to Columbia to get my master's. I don't know how it is here in California, actually, but in Connecticut and New York, you pretty much have to get a master's to get your teaching credential. So that's what I did. I envisioned that I would just be a teacher until I retired. I don't know. It just, I think other people think of these career paths, but with teaching, there's not much of a path. You don't really get promoted or advance. You just kind of get better at what you're doing and maybe move to a school that pays you better and maybe become a principal if you're interested in administration. But I didn't really think about it like that. Once I started working with adults, that was the first time there was a shift where I was like, okay, I didn't actually expect to teach adults, and okay, things, have changed. My plan is not really working out. But it felt temporary, so I just kind of went with it. Once I got a job, so there was a grant that I worked on before I came to UCLA that was in Iowa, and it was the Pathways to Healthcare Careers. So we had immigrants and refugees that received a scholarship through this federal grant. It was a partnership between their Bureau of Refugee Services, their workforce development, and then this college that I worked at. So I was their academic counselor, basically making sure they got through these nurse aid, paramedic, medical assistant type of programs. And I think that's when I started having a different idea of what I could do, that it didn't just need to be in the classroom, that there's other ways to support people's development and growth and goals and dreams that isn't just being in the classroom. But that still utilizes all of those skills. And so now that I'm looking for jobs again, just having had that experience and then, the experience with Project Spell that also required me to do a lot of that, I think I've just expanded what I can do. Whereas back when I was, 23 or 24, I had just gotten my teaching credential and started teaching. My idea was all I can do is teach. I'm not qualified for any of these other jobs because I've never done X, Y, and Z. And now I look at it like I can actually do anything. I'll figure it out. I need to go in, as we always hear, with the confidence of a mediocre white man. So you just have to go in and assume, I deserve to be here as much as anyone else. I can do this. Let me just try. If I fail, it is actually not the end of the world. I just learned that thing was not for me. And I know, that's hard. That's not as easy as I'm making it sound, but I think just being more open to things that are not safe bets for me, it's definitely expanded my idea of where my career could go. But if you ask me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I hate that interview question. I'm I don't know, because anything can happen. Look at what's going on now. Anything can happen, right? And you might meet someone, through networking that just totally changes your course. So, I definitely think first gens, you have a goal, you have a dream. I'm not telling you to like just abandon that randomly, but be open to other things. If you love science and, medicine, but you finish your undergrad and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can still do like 10 years of med school. It just, feels overwhelming. It's like, there are other things you can do with those passions. You can go into public health. Like there's so many other things you can do. And so it definitely is worth it to learn about those things, interview for jobs. Job interviews are a two-way street, and that's a chance for you to learn about like what something is all about and what it entails. Do informational interviews. Just try to learn about as many different jobs and do as much networking as possible, because that opens so many more possibilities for you. And like you mentioned earlier, you can stumble on something that you love and you're like, wow, I never would have found this if I had just, kind of stayed in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I would be here, but, honestly, I don't think too many unemployed people say this, but I'm kind of excited to see what's next, because I feel like now it's like all these opportunities are out there and I can log on to Indeed or something one day and see something that's, my next thing that I feel like it's meant for me. And, that's exciting. And that's why I think, first gen should look at it. Not so much like I got to impress this person and make sure that like I kiss their ass and suck up to them and tell them everything they want to hear. But like, is this for me? Does this serve me? Does this serve my purpose? Does this help me be where I want to be, progress, learn, and grow? And if it doesn't, I mean, I understand there is capitalism. We're in a dystopian hellscape in 2020 and people need to make money. But it is worth it to find something that, fits if you have that. I guess I'll call it a luxury, even though it shouldn't be, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That is like advice right there. especially right now for first gen who can see this. Like that's something that I would have liked to hear like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Okay, so we're wrapping up, but this is a question I want to ask you and future interviewees to close off the session, which is, what does first generation mean to you?
Oh my gosh, this is such a hard question. For me, it is such a diverse group of people. I think we forget that. It's not necessarily like only low income people. It's not necessarily one ethnic group or another. I had a tutor who is Korean and he was a first gen and he was like, all the East Asians at UCLA are not first gens. It was like just me. And he felt very just not fitting in anywhere, and that always sticks with me, that like we come from all different kind of life experiences, but we just have this one thing in common, which is that we actually kick ass so much harder than everyone else on campus, because we show up and we don't know what the hell is going on. And we still walk across that stage at the end of the 4 years with the degree, just like people that didn't have to have a job, that didn't have to translate every last thing, for their parents, that didn't have to live in a crappy apartment because they couldn't afford the nice one, like we persevere. And like I said earlier, I don't think we should have to. I think there should be a lot more structural support. But with that being said, like we are kicking ass. We're doing it. Like we're doing the thing. I had another tutor. Shout out to Iman if she watches this. I'm talking about you, girl. She was like, I'm kind of feeling weird about my parents coming to my MIMG graduation, which is like, I don't know, microbiology, immunology, some other science things. I forget the acronym, but it's like a STEM major. She was like, I am the only Latina in my graduating class. And my parents are farm workers, and I know they're going to show up and they don't really speak English, and I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. And I was like, man, what a world, where you and your parents are going to feel embarrassed. Like, what advantages did they give you coming in here besides your character, you know, and the lessons they taught you. They didn't have money to give you. They didn't have tutors to give you. They couldn't tell you how to navigate anything. They couldn't even talk. They couldn't even ask you in the same language, hey, what are you learning in class? But you're here. You did this. You're here. If anything, y'all should be like prouder, you know. And I mean, I told her, I was like, if I were your parents, I would have like wrapped myself in the flag and like walked in with a mariachi, because it's like, if anything, you deserve more respect, you know, more props. And so I think remembering that, even though we get messages to the opposite every day, it's like, we are really out here kicking a lot of ass. And so when I hear first gen, for me, it's like, I'm only envisioning like people that are just like killing the game, I guess is the way I would put it. Like, you know, and for me, like if I was hiring, I would hire a first gen any day, because they know how to figure stuff out. Like, they're not just resting back on their laurels, you know, just assuming that like they already know everything. They're figuring stuff out. And so, it's like we all have to have solidarity with each other, because we are doing a lot of hard things. And when you're alone in that, you feel like I'm the only one, but there's so many of us out there that are really overcoming a lot of struggles, and we don't get help from our universities, from our institutions, and you know, even from our families, although they may do their best, right? So there's nothing against people's families, because I know they give us a lot of other things that are not valued at a college, especially a PWI. But with that being said, yeah, like if you're a first gen, that's an identity to wear on your sleeve and be proud of every day.
Oh my God. So much wisdom. Dropping it left and right. Thank you, Stephanie.
I don't feel that wise, but you're making me feel like, okay, maybe like I have something figured out.
I mean, yeah, I don't spend a lot of time talking to people older than me, and who've been, you know, through things. But
okay.
So like, I mean, if this is news to me, or, you know, if this is like a welcome, like, oh, I can't believe, you know, I keep forgetting this. This is a timely reminder for me. If I'm feeling this way, then no doubt, you know, current college students are feeling this way as well. So yeah.
You know what? Wisdom, it does come with age. So like, I don't take any offense to that. I'm so happy to be in my 30s, because I've calmed down. I don't have the sense of urgency that I had to like, I need to do everything, you know, within a year after graduating. You just kind of chill out a little bit. Yeah, just kind of figure out like what serves you. And so to anybody that is in college or like a really recent alum, my advice is not really given flippantly. It's not like, oh, just, you know, flip a switch in your brain and think like me. It's kind of like an end goal that is a process, and it may require therapy. You know, it may require like finding support from people that are not your family, that can understand like a different perspective. It may require eliminating certain people, places, things from your life, you know, leaving a job. And it's something that you probably won't notice happening. You know, it's definitely not sudden changes, but little by little, you settle into yourself, and that's incredibly empowering. And that's something that, you know, I think everybody deserves to experience. It's kind of my wish for all first gens, especially, is to really be able to own that, you know, and let people know who you are. They can take it or leave it.
Well, who you are, Stephanie Youngblood. If you want, do you have any like social media you want to plug? First of all.
Oh my God, no, don't direct people to my Twitter. I act a fool on my Twitter. It needs to remain like very chill. No, you know what? I'm going to just give a really quick shout out to LT, who runs the Empowering First Gen Facebook group. That's like my sister, my mentor, I don't even know how, like what word you would use for her, but she is a gift, a treasure, and we really don't deserve her, but here she is doing so much for all of us. And I think it's, like you mentioned, you know, talking to someone who's a little older than you, it is helpful. So for me to have someone that's a little bit older than me who's been here, it's, you know, something that it's hard. You have to be open to it. There's a little bit of a vulnerability in asking for help and advice and support. And I think a lot of first gens want to like do it on their own. But I think if we, you know, really build up our communities and rely on that and find people that are mentors, then, you know, so I would recommend anybody listening, go to the Empowering First Gens group, join. It's such a mix of like high school students, current college students, alums, people that aren't first gens but work with first gens and want to learn more. And so it's a really good community to ask everything from like, what kind of laptops should I get, to how should I do programming for first gen. So yeah, find people that support you, and everybody else, you know, it's like help me or get out of my way. You know, so the group, the Facebook group is definitely like a help me vibe. So everybody go join that. Do not try to find me on Twitter. I need my privacy. I need my voice to scream into.
Okay. Don't follow Stephanie Youngblood on social media. Do not. Okay. Well, that's all. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It is LaTanya's world, and we're just living in it. And you know,
wow. But she would not want us to say that, though.
No, okay, yeah. I mean, well, it's already said. So, what are you gonna do?
But she is. She's the shit. I don't think, you know, people like LT get the credit or the recognition necessarily like in their professional roles from their higher ups. But, you know, I do think that like we, the people, we do see that she is really like an incredible innovator for our community, and somebody that brings it to the forefront and helps us feel very empowered in saying that we're first gens. And that's a huge shift from when I was in school, and that was not even a term that I had ever heard before. So she's one of the people that takes that forward. Shout out LT.
Shout out LT. Maybe we don't have a name for this series yet. Maybe we'll call it the LT Appreciation Podcast or something.
LT Appreciation Podcast. She also would not want that, but.
Nope, definitely not. But also, again, here we are. Okay, well, thank you again for your time. Sure. Hire this woman. World.
Yeah, give me a job. Come on.
And yeah, I guess be well. Thanks for dropping the wisdom again and being willing to sit down with me, as the very first person to be interviewed for this series.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you, for your time and your questions. And I think it's great what you're doing. So I just want to give you some props that you're putting all this together and using your quarantine time pretty wisely, I think, because I think it's going to be a very valuable resource for who knows how many generations of first gens are going to, watch these videos and things that you're putting together. So
I hope so. Thanks. All right. Well, take care.
All right. Bye, Chris.
Bye, Stephanie.